Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about 2 trip reports of a little known psychedelic tryptamine called 4-HO-MET. Hey friends and seekers, welcome back to the channel. If you're new, my name is Tyler. I'm a psychonaut and musician based in Houston, Texas. And on this channel, we talk about psychedelic experiences, visions, esoterica, and all sorts of high weirdness while having a healthy dash of skepticism, but still keeping a radical open-mindedness. Today, we're talking about my favorite psychedelic besides LSD. So usually when I'm watching YouTube videos, I don't like it when people explain the basics of something that I've heard 1,000 times. Like for example, if I'm watching a video about ayahuasca, they'll be like, ayahuasca is a tropical vine that you combine with this other one that makes it the DMT orally active, and I'm like, yeah, like I know, I've heard that 1,000 times. But today is going to be a little bit of an exception where I'm going to briefly explain this chemical because it's a lot less known than ayahuasca, which is a more mainstream example. However, this is a very little known and obscure psychedelic substance created by the psychedelic chemist Sasha Shulgin. So I figured I would explain it briefly to those of you who are curious. If not, I'm gonna break this down into chapters and you can skip ahead. Okay, so just starting off, some of the names that you might hear this substance called are 4-HO-MET, Metocin, and color. So it's considered a substitute tryptamine. And the tryptamine class of compounds includes all the classics like psilocybin and DMT. So psilocin is what mushrooms convert to whenever you consume them, and the name of that compound is 4-HO-DMT. So 4-HO-MET is just a slightly tweaked version of that. They're closely related and they both last about 6 hours. So I'm gonna add a link to this in the description, but I found that the description on the Psychonaut wiki page was pretty good for 4-HO-MET, so I'm just going to read that to you real quick. Users typically describe 4-HO-MET as a more recreational version of psilocybin mushrooms due to its less serious headspace and greater emphasis on visual effects. So when my friend texted me asking me if I would be interested in this, that was kind of how he sold it to me too. He was like, the headspace is a lot less headfucky, and it's an extremely visual psychedelic. So it's more fun, more recreational, and more hallucinogenic, if you want to use that word. So there's 2 main ways to take it. 1, you can mix it in water, or 2 is insufflating. I'll let you look that one up. When it's insufflated, the trip comes on very, very fast. I'm talking about 10 minutes after taking it, you're on the rocket. This was also my first time insufflating. I've never taken any substance that way before. And within 10 minutes of taking it, I was already coming up fast. And I think for a lot of people, including me, the faster the come up, the more uncomfortable and sometimes terrifying that it can be. So I also knew that my friend's mom was coming home, so I had a glass of red wine. It was like a tiny glass of red wine to kind of like calm my nerves a little bit as I was rapidly coming up on this trip. So the very first thing that I felt was this just intense euphoria. It was like just the most concentrated bliss. It was like the happiest feeling you've ever felt in your life, but concentrated times 100. A lot of psychedelic euphoria feels like that, but especially on 4-HO-MET, it was just so euphoric and warm, and it felt like I was in a blanket. I was sitting at the table with my friends as I approached my peak. Everything just had this like glowing warmth and positivity behind it. You know, when you're sitting with your friends and it's just really good vibes. It was just that, but amplified. So the trippiness was mostly visual, and it kind of came in waves. Like you'd be sitting there 1 second feeling totally sober in a way, and just talking and not feeling anything besides that euphoria, but then the visual side of the trip would come on in very strong waves. So you would go from 1 second feeling totally normal to the next second being like, whoa, like I'm deep in this shit. It would just get really trippy and then normal and then trippy again. I was reading Sasha Shulgin's report about it. He didn't write too much about 4-HOMET. One of the things he did write that I read after my trip pretty much lines up. So this is from Shulgin's book called Tikal. He said, as with psilocin, the experience was wave-like, with an alteration of effects between near normal perception at 1 minute, only to be swept up in a swirl of altered concepts in the next minute. So that lines up exactly with my experience. So when I was peaking, I looked at my friends across the table. There was one dude, one girl, and I started to really hallucinate. I was sitting at the table with my friends, and when I looked at them, I saw their unique aura and the geometry of their auras. So you know how like when a dog runs around in a yard, or like if there's no sidewalk and people walk along the grass and they kind of make their own trail, after so many times of walking down that trail, they'll start to kill the grass, so you can kind of see where the dog like always runs or where the people always walk. It's like you're imprinting into the environment. So these auras that I saw were kind of like that. It was almost as if every physical movement that the person made was kind of etching into the space around them and kind of leaving an imprint in the field of their aura. So I'll just describe you my friend's aura and kind of like back this idea up. So I was looking at my first friend, and he had very like straight lines and like geometric kind of like diamond shapes and stuff like that, but I had this strong sense that what I was seeing was the imprint of his physical movements. And I know that this friend is always using the computer and always online and stuff, so I saw a lot of like lines right here in front of him, and just kind of like in general the geometry of where you would move your hands if you were on a keyboard or with a mouse. It was like all these spaces right here where you would have your hands on the computer were all imprinted from all those motions that he had done like thousands of times. But of course it had this extra like psychedelic flair where it was very like geometric and all unified and coherent. It wasn't like sloppy or anything like that. It was almost like if you think of those pictures of the Hindu gods, you know, or like the Jimi Hendrix album cover where you see all their arms and like all the possible positions. It was like that, but imagine like a Sims character and a more digital kind of modern version of that. It was really interesting. And I felt like this rigidity of the lines kind of also represented his personality. And that was especially true when you contrast it with the other aura that I saw of his girlfriend. So when I was looking across at her aura was very, very unique and different. For her, it was almost more like curved lines, and like it was kind of being accented by her body language. So she would kind of like maybe go like this with her hand and then like maybe lean on her hip a little bit, and then a line, like a pink, like this curvy line would just kind of radiate from her as she was speaking. And I saw her body language, all of these curvy and like beautiful lines were emanating from her, and it had this very like Hindu goddess kind of like vibe to it, and it was very like complimentary of her personality, you know, very bubbly and warm and like organic. And it was just an interesting contrast to my friends, who was very like geometric and diamondy, and hers was very much like organic and round, and it was almost like totally opposite. But it just goes to show that everyone has their very unique aura. I don't really remember much besides that aura thing from my peak and the intense euphoria. So I'm gonna tell you about the second time that I tried 4-HOMET. And let me just add in real quick that both times that I tried this, I took a baby dose. Like if you read on the Psychonaut Wiki what's considered a small dose to medium, it starts off small at like 20 milligrams. And I'm pretty sure I had like 5, 10, or 15 milligrams. So I was below the threshold of what's considered a small dose, and I still tripped pretty hard. So I'm different, I have my own metabolism, and I'm super sensitive to psychedelics, so that might not go the same way for me. It also had probably something to do with the fact that I didn't mix it in water and I insufflated it instead. So don't know why it affected me that much, but it did. And the second time I tried it, I took maybe a little bit more, maybe the same. It was still a pretty light dose, but still had a profound effect. So I took the 4-HO at my friend's house, and a few hours after it came on, I went to band practice with my band, Sunrise and Ammunition. So it was on the car ride to band practice that all the interesting things happened in my trip. So on the way to the place where we practiced, we were listening to some songs. I remember one of them that came on was the Siren song by Flying Lotus and Angel Deradorian, who are two of my favorite psychedelic artists. I just remember getting a feeling that this song was just super psychedelic and, giving me visuals and all that good stuff. So the most memorable part of that, though, was when I was listening to this song called Halagalo by this band called Nue, and that's a 70s krautrock band, so kind of like this unique German strain of psychedelic rock. If you haven't ever heard of krautrock, I'm going to add a link to this song so you can hear what I was talking about. But when I was listening to this song, it has these long drawn out guitar notes that are and while I was hearing these sounds, I was closing my eyes, and it was as if the sound, I was experiencing synesthesia. So it was as if the sound was causing me to see things very directly. And when I closed my eyes and I was listening to these long, drawn-out guitar notes, I felt like I was getting painted from the inside, starting in my crown chakra area. It felt like the sound was literally painting my insides, and I could see it light up my entire body. My whole soul was just being illuminated. It was like these notes of music were like a paintbrush, but they were painting me on the inside, and it was just these very strong and vivid colors, and it felt like I was actually being painted somehow, energetically. It was really cool. So I remember when I was listening to these things, it was super trippy, and it was just making me reflect. I noticed that when I was reflecting, that I could go into those same deep spaces of contemplation and serious work on yourself and your psyche and your soul. Because I mentioned that this is a lighter substance, right? It's less of a headspace. But what I discovered is that it can be used to go past the ego and to, do shadow work or any of that stuff that comes with the therapeutic side of other psychedelics. You can experience that with 4-HO-MET. But what I've come to notice is that it's voluntary. It has to do with your own will to go to those places and to reflect and to do that work on yourself. Whereas with mushrooms or LSD, it's they're telling you this is what you're going to do. Whether you're ready or not, this is the work we're going to do. But with 4-HO-MET, I felt like it was more my choice and my will, but that you could still get to those same levels of deep self-reflection. So I don't want to make it seem like it's only fun and recreational and that's the only thing you can do with it. So I just thought that was interesting, that it seemed more voluntary on your part if you want to go and do those deep kinds of work on yourself. So overall, I had a great experience both times that I took it. It's a extremely interesting psychedelic, and I think it has a big future in the psychedelic world, especially for those who are not trying to experience the deeper and darker sides of the work that you do on the classic psychedelics, which obviously has its place and its importance, but I think that to me this is the most fun psychedelic that I've ever tried, and I only have dipped my toes in the water, so there's probably so much more. And if you go to Arrowhead, you can read some trip reports of people meeting these octopus gods made out of light and stuff like that. Like, I never got that deep, but I don't doubt it whatsoever, because of, you know, I just took a tiny amount of it and I experienced some very vivid hallucinations and profound kind of insights. Sadly, it's hard to get, and it exists in a legal gray area in the US. I think under certain laws in other countries it would fall under the tryptamine analog clause. Like, some countries have laws where anything that's like a substitute of this type of compound is like, that's the umbrella term, like that's the law that like contains all of those kind of like analogs and substitute tryptamines and stuff like that. So it's pretty rare, but if you do happen to get your hands on it, it's definitely worth a try, and very, very interesting, and I think it has a future in the psychedelic world, absolutely. And of course, I look forward myself to exploring this more, and I'll definitely make a video next time I try it. So thanks for watching my video today, guys. I have a playlist right here of all my trip reports, where I've done mushroom trip reports, LSD trip reports, I even do a cannabis trip report. I also do interviews with psychedelic musicians, artists, and poets, which I have as another playlist called Conversations. I also recently finished a 3-part series called Breadcrumbs to the Unconscious. We talk about archetypes, synchronicities, the collective unconscious, alchemy, and just the big mystery of it all, and how it led me here to my current place as a psychedelic person. So that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks for checking out this trip report. Hope you enjoyed it. Please hit the like, subscribe, all that good stuff. It helps, especially when this is a new channel. So I appreciate all of you guys who have been sticking around for a while now, and everyone who's new, glad you could find this video. I'm working on my next video right now, which is about this crazy book that Tim Leary wrote in jail called Exopsychology, where he takes the ideas of chakras and kind of rehashes them and calls them circuits, and he makes the argument that the higher level chakras or circuits are preparing us for life in space as an extraterrestrial species. It's just this crazy book, and I love it so much, and so I'm working on that, and that'll be the next one that comes out. Thanks again for watching. Hope you all have a good day, and I'll see you later. Peace.